Don Juan by Lord Byron. Canto I, Part 1. I want a hero, an uncommon want, when every year and month sends forth a new one, till after clawing the gazettes with cant, the age discovers he is not the true one. Of such as these I should not care to vaunt. I'll therefore take our ancient friend Don Juan. We've all seen him in the pantomime, sent to the devil somewhat ere his time. Vernon, the butcher Cumberland, Wolfe, Hawke, Prince Ferdinand, Granby, Burgoyne, Keppel, Howe, evil and good have had their tithe of talk, and filled their signposts then, like Wellesley now, each in their turn like Banquo's monarchs stalk, followers of fame, 9 Pharaoh of that sow. France too had Bonaparte and Dumouriez, recorded in the Moniteur and Courrier. Barnave, Brissot, Condorcet, Mirabeau, Pétion, Clootz, Danton, Marat, Lafayette were French and famous people, as we know, and there were others, scarce forgotten yet: Joubert, Hoche, Marceau, Lannes, Desaix, Moreau, with many of the military set, exceedingly remarkable at times, but not at all adapted to my rhymes. Nelson was once Britannia's god of war, and still should be so, but the tide is turned. There's no more to be said of Trafalgar, 'tis with our hero quietly inurned, because the army's grown more popular, at which the naval people are concerned. Besides, the prince is all for the land service, forgetting Duncan, Nelson, Howe, and Jervis. Brave men were living before Agamemnon, and since, exceeding valorous and sage, a good deal like him too, though quite the same none. But then they shone not on the poet's page, and so have been forgotten. I condemn none, but can't find any in the present age fit for my poem, that is, for my new one. So, as I said, I'll take my friend Don Juan. Most epic poets plunge in medias res. Horace makes this the heroic turnpike road, and then your hero tells, whene'er you please, what went before, by way of episode, while seated after dinner at his ease beside his mistress, in some soft abode, palace or garden, paradise or cavern, which serves the happy couple for a tavern. That is the usual method, but not mine. My way is to begin with the beginning. The regularity of my design forbids all wandering as the worst of sinning, and therefore I shall open with a line, although it cost me half an hour in spinning, narrating somewhat of Don Juan's father, and also of his mother, if you'd rather. In Seville was he born, a pleasant city, famous for oranges and women. He who has not seen it will be much to pity, so says the proverb, and I quite agree. Of all the Spanish towns, none is more pretty. Cadiz, perhaps, but that you soon may see. Don Juan's parents lived beside the river, a noble stream, and called the Guadalquivir. His father's name was Jose, Don, of course, a true hidalgo free from every strain of Moor or Hebrew blood. He traced his source through the most Gothic gentleman of Spain. A better cavalier ne'er mounted horse, or being mounted e'er got down again, than Jose, who begot our hero, who begot— but that's to come. Well, to renew, his mother was a learned lady, famed for every branch of every science known in every Christian language ever named. With virtues equall'd by her wit alone, she made the cleverest people quite ashamed, and even the good with inward envy grown, finding themselves so very much exceeded in their own way by all the things that she did. Her memory was a mine, she knew by heart all Calderon and the greater part of Lope, so that if any actor missed his part, she could have served him for the prompter's copy. For her finagles were an useless art, and he himself obliged to shut up shop. He could never make a memory so fine as that which adorned the brain of Donna Inez. Her favourite science was the mathematical. Her noblest virtue was her magnanimity. Her wit, she sometimes tried at wit, was Attic. All her serious sayings darkened to sublimity. In short, in all things she was fairly what I call a prodigy. Her morning dress was dimity, her evening silk, or in the summer muslin, and other stuffs, with which I won't stay puzzling. She knew the Latin, that is the Lord's Prayer, and Greek, the alphabet, I'm nearly sure. She read some French romances here and there, although her mode of speaking was not pure. For native Spanish she had no great care, at least her conversation was obscure. Her thoughts were theorems, her words a problem, as if she deem'd that mystery would ennoble them. She liked the English and the Hebrew tongue, and said there was analogy between them. She proved it somehow, out of sacred song, but I must leave the proof to those who've seen 'em. But this I heard her say, and can't be wrong, and all may think which way their judgments lean 'em. 'Tis strange the Hebrew noun, which means I am, the English always use to govern damn. Some women use their tongues. She look'd a lecture, each eye a sermon, and her brow a homily, and all in all sufficient self-director, like the lamented late Sir Samuel Romilly, the law's expounder and the state's corrector, whose suicide was almost an anomaly. One sad example more that all is vanity. The jury brought their verdict in insanity. In short, she was a walking calculation, Miss Edgeworth's novels stepping from their covers, or Mrs. Trimmer's books on education, or Caleb's wife set out in quest of lovers. Morality's prim personification, in which not envy's self a flaw discovers. To others' share let female errors fall, for she had not even one. The worst of all. Oh, she was perfect, past all parallel of any modern female saint's comparison. So far above the cunning powers of hell, her guardian angel had given up his garrison. Even her minutest motions went as well as those of the best timepiece made by Harrison. In virtues, nothing earthly could surpass her, save thine incomparable oil, Macassar. Perfect she was, but as perfection is insipid in this naughty world of ours, where our first parents never learnt to kiss till they were exiled from their earlier bowers, where all was peace and innocence and bliss, I wonder how they got through the 12 hours. Don Jose, like a lineal son of Eve, went plucking various fruit without her leave. He was a mortal of the careless kind, with no great love for learning or the learned, who chose to go where'er he had a mind, and never dream'd his lady was concerned. The world, as usual, wickedly inclined to see a kingdom or a house o'erturned, whisper'd he had a mistress, some said two, but for domestic quarrels one will do. Now Donna Inez had, with all her merit, a great opinion of her own good qualities. Neglect indeed requires a saint to bear it, and such indeed she was in her moralities, but then she had the devil of a spirit, and sometimes mixed up fancies with realities, and let few opportunities escape of getting her liege lord into a scrape. This was an easy matter with a man oft in the wrong, and never on his guard, and even the wisest do the best they can, have moments, hours, and days so unprepared that you might brain them with their lady's fan. And sometimes ladies hit exceeding hard, and fans turn into falchions in fair hands, and why and wherefore no one understands. 'Tis pity learned virgins ever wed with persons of no sort of education, or gentlemen who, though well born and bred, grow tired of scientific conversation. I don't choose to say much upon this head, I'm a plain man, and in single station. But oh, ye lords of ladies intellectual, inform us truly, have they not henpecked you all? Don Jose and his lady quarrelled. Why? Not any of them any could divine, though several thousand people chose to try. 'Twas surely no concern of theirs, nor mine. I loathe that low vice, curiosity. But if there's anything in which I shine, 'tis in arranging all my friends' affairs, not having of my own domestic cares. And so I interfered, and with the best intentions, but their treatment was not kind. I think the foolish people were possessed, for neither of them could I ever find, although their porter afterwards confessed, but that's no matter, and the worst's behind, for little Juan o'er me threw downstairs a pail of housemaid's waters, unawares. A little curly-headed, good-for-nothing and mischief-making monkey from his birth, His parents ne'er agreed except in doting upon the most unquiet imp on earth. Instead of quarrelling, had they been but both in their senses, they'd have sent young master forth to school, or had him soundly whipp'd at home to teach him manners for the time to come. Don Jose and the Donna Inez led for some time an unhappy sort of life, wishing each other not divorced, but dead. They lived respectably as man and wife. Their conduct was exceedingly well bred, and gave no outward sign of inward strife, until at length the smothered fire broke out, and put the business past all kind of doubt. For Inez called some druggists and physicians, and tried to prove her loving lord was mad. But as he had some lucid intermission, she next decided he was only bad. Yet when they asked her for her depositions, no sort of explanation could be had, save that her duty both to man and God required this conduct, which seemed very odd. She kept a journal where his faults were noted, and opened certain trunks of books and letters, all which might, if occasion served, be quoted. And then she had all Seville for abettors, besides her good old grandmother, who doted. The hearers of her case became repeaters, then advocates, inquisitors, and judges, some for amusement, others for old grudges. And then this best and weakest woman bore with such serenity her husband's woes, just as the Spartan ladies did of yore, who saw their spouses killed, and nobly chose never to say a word about them more. Calmly she heard each calumny that rose, and saw his agonies with such sublimity, that all the world exclaim'd, "What magnanimity!" No doubt this patience when the world is damning us is philosophic in our former friends. 'Tis also pleasant to be deemed magnanimous, and the more so in obtaining our own ends. And what the lawyers call a malus animus, conduct like this by no means comprehends. Revenge in person certainly no virtue, but then 'tis not my fault if others hurt you. And if your quarrels should rip up old stories, and help them with a lie or two additional, I'm not to blame, as you well know, no more is any one else. They were become traditional. Besides, their resurrection aids our glories by contrast, which is just what we were wishing all, and science profits by this resurrection. Dead scandals form good subjects for dissection. Their friends had tried at reconciliation, then their relations, who made matters worse. 'Twere hard to tell upon a like occasion to whom it may be best to have recourse. I can't say much for friend or yet relation. The lawyers did their utmost for divorce, but scarce a fee was paid on either side before, unluckily, Don Jose died. He died, and most unluckily, because, according to all hints I could collect from counsel learned in those kinds of laws, although their talk's obscure and circumspect, his death contrived to spoil a charming cause. 1,000 pities also with respect to public feelings, which on this occasion was manifested in a great sensation. But he died, and buried with him lay the public feeling and the lawyer's fees. His house was sold, his servants sent away. A Jew took one of his 2 mistresses, a priest the other, at least so they say. I asked the doctors after his disease. He died of the slow fever called the tertian, and left his widow to her own aversion. Yet Jose was an honourable man, that I must say who knew him well. Therefore his frailties I'll no further scan. Indeed there were not many more to tell, and if his passions now and then outran discretion, and were not so peaceable as Numa's, who was also named Pompilius, he had been ill brought up, and was born bilious. Whate'er might be his worthlessness or worth, poor fellow, he had many things to wound him. Let's own, since it can do no good on earth, it was a trying moment that which found him standing alone beside his desolate hearth, where all his household gods lay shiver'd round him. No choice was left his feelings or his pride, save death or Doctors' Commons. So he died. Canto I, Part II. Dying intestate, Juan was sole heir to a chancery suit, and messages and lands, which, with a long minority and care, promised to turn out well in proper hands. Inez became sole guardian, which was fair, and answer'd but to nature's just demands. An only son, left with an only mother, is brought up much more wisely than another. Sagest of women, even of widows, she resolved that Juan should be quite a paragon, and worthy of the noblest degree. His sire was of Castile, his dam from Aragon. Then, for accomplishments of chivalry, in case our lord the king should go to war again, he learn'd the arts of riding, fencing, gunnery, and how to scale a fortress, or a nunnery. But that which Donna Inez most desired, and saw into herself each day before all the learned tutors whom for him she hired, was that his breeding should be strictly moral. Much into all his studies she inquired, and so they were submitted first to her, all arts, sciences. No branch was made a mystery to Juan's eyes, excepting natural history. The languages, especially the dead, the sciences, and most of all the abstruse, the arts, at least all such as could be said to be the most remote from common use, in all these he was much and deeply read, but not a page of anything that's loose or hints continuation of the species was ever suffered, lest he should grow vicious. His classic studies made a little puzzle, because of filthy loves of gods and goddesses, who in the earlier ages raised a bustle, but never put on pantaloons or bodices. His reverend tutors had at times a tussle, and for their Aeneids, Iliads, and Odysseys were forced to make an odd sort of apology, for Donna Inez dreaded the mythology. Ovid's a rake, as half his verses show him. Anacreon's morals are a still worse sample. Catullus scarcely has a decent poem. I don't think Sappho's Ode a good example, although Longinus tells us there is no hymn where the sublime soars forth on wings more ample. But Virgil's songs are pure, except that horrid one beginning with Formosum pastor Corydon. Lucretius's irreligion is too strong for early stomachs to prove wholesome food. I can't help thinking Juvenal was wrong, although no doubt his real intent was good, for speaking out so plainly in his song, so much indeed as to be downright rude. And then what proper person could be partial to all those nauseous epigrams of Martial? Juan was taught from out the best edition, expurgated by learned men, who place judiciously from out the schoolboy's vision the grosser parts, but fearful to deface too much their modest bard by this omission, and pitying sore his mutilated case, they only add them all in an appendix, which saves, in fact, the trouble of an index. For there we have them all at one fell swoop. Instead of being scattered through the pages, they stand forth marshall'd in a handsome troop, to meet the ingenious youth of future ages, till some less rigid editor shall stoop to call them back into their separate cages, instead of standing staring all together, like garden gods, and not so decent either. The missal, too, it was the family missal, was ornamented in a sort of way which ancient mass books often are, and this all kinds of grotesque illumined. And how they who saw those figures on the margin kiss all could turn their optics to the text and pray is more than I know. But Don Juan's mother kept this herself, and gave her son another. Sermons he read, and lectures he endured, and homilies, and lives of all the saints. To Jerome and Chrysostom inured, he did not take such studies for restraints. But how faith is acquired, and then ensured, so well not one of the aforesaid paints as St. Augustine in his fine Confessions, which makes the reader envy his transgressions. This too was a sealed book to little Juan, but I can't but say his mamma was right, if such an education was the true one. She scarcely trusted him from out her sight. Her maids were old, and if she took a new one, you might be sure she was a perfect fright. She did this during even her husband's life. I recommend as much to every wife. Young Juan waxed in goodliness and grace, at 6 a charming child, and at 11 with all the promise of as fine a face as e'er to man's maturer growth was given. He studied steadily, and grew apace, and seem'd at least in the right road to heaven, for half his days were passed in church, the other between his tutors, confessor, and mother. At 6 I said he was a charming child. At 12 he was a fine but quiet boy, though in infancy a little wild. They tamed him down amongst them To destroy his natural spirit not in vain they toil'd, at least it seem'd so, and his mother's joy was to declare how sage and still and steady her young philosopher was grown already. I had my doubts, perhaps I have them still, but what I say is neither here nor there. I knew his father well, and have some skill in character, but it would not be fair from sire to son to augur good or ill. He and his wife were an ill-sorted pair, but scandal's my aversion. I protest against all evil speaking, even in jest. For my part, I say nothing, nothing but this I will say, my reasons are my own, that if I had an only son to put to school, as God be praised that I have none, 'tis not with Donna Inez I would shut him up to learn his catechism alone. No, I'd send him out betimes to college, for there it was I picked up my own knowledge. For there one learns, 'tis not for me to boast, though I acquired, but I pass over that, as well as all the Greek I since have lost. I say there's the place, but verbum sat. I think I picked up too, as well as most, knowledge of matters, but no matter what. I never married, but I think I know that sons should not be educated so. Young Juan now was 16 years of age, tall, handsome, slender, but well knit. He seem'd active, though not so sprightly as a page, and everybody but his mother deem'd him almost man. But she flew in a rage and bit her lips, for else she might have scream'd if any said so, for to be precocious was in her eyes a thing the most atrocious. Canto I, Part III. Amongst her numerous acquaintance, all selected for discretion and devotion, there was the Donna Julia, whom to call pretty were but to give a feeble notion of many charms in her as natural as sweetness to the flower, or salt to ocean, her zone to Venus, or his bow to Cupid. But this last simile is trite and stupid. The darkness of her oriental eye accorded with her Moorish origin. Her blood was not all Spanish, by the by. In Spain, you know, this is a sort of sin. When proud Granada fell, and forced to fly Boabdil wept, of Donna Julia's kin some went to Africa, some stayed in Spain. Her great-great-grandmamma chose to remain. She married, I forget the degree, with an hidalgo, who transmitted down his blood less noble than such blood should be. At such alliances his sires would frown, in that point so precise in each degree, that they bred in and in, as might be shown, marrying their cousins, nay, their aunts and nieces, which always spoils the breed if it increases. This heathenish cross restored the breed again, ruined its blood, but much improved its flesh. For from a root the ugliest in old Spain sprung up a branch as beautiful as fresh. The sons no more were short, the daughters plain. But there's a rumour, which I fain would hush, 'tis said that Donna Julia's grandmamma produced her Don more heirs at love than law. However this might be, the race went on improving still through every generation, until it centred in an only son, who left an only daughter. My narration may have suggested that this single one could be but Julia, whom on this occasion I shall have much to speak about, and she was married, charming, chaste, and 23. Her eye, I'm very fond of handsome eyes, was large and dark, suppressing half its fire until she spoke, and then through its soft disguise flashed an expression more of pride than ire, and love than either. And there would arise a something in them which was not desire, but would have been, perhaps, but for the soul which struggled through and chastened down the whole. Her glossy hair was clustered o'er a brow bright with intelligence, and fair and smooth. Her eyebrow's shape was like the aerial bow, her cheek all purple with the beam of youth, mounting at times to a transparent glow, as if her veins ran lightning. She, in sooth, possessed an air and grace by no means common. Her stature tall, I hate a dumpy woman. Wedded she was some years, and to a man of 50, and such husbands are in plenty, and yet I think, instead of such a one, 'twere better to have 2 of 25, especially in countries near the sun. And now I think on't, mi vien in mente, Ladies of even the most uneasy virtue prefer a spouse whose age is short of 30. 'Tis a sad thing, I cannot choose to say, And all the fault of that indecent son, Who cannot leave alone our helpless clay, But will keep baking, broiling, burning on, That howsoever people fast and pray, The flesh is frail, and so the soul undone. What men call gallantry, and God's adultery, Is much more common where the climate's sultry. Happy the nations of the moral north, Where all is virtue, and the winter season Sends sin without a rag on shivering forth. 'Twas snow that brought St. Anthony to reason, Where juries cast up what a wife is worth, By laying whate'er sum in mulct they please on The lover, who must pay a handsome price, Because it is a marketable vice. Alfonso was the name of Julia's lord, A man well looking for his years, and who was neither much beloved nor yet abhorr'd. They lived together as most people do, Suffering each other's foibles by accord, And not exactly either one or two. Yet he was jealous, though he did not show it, For jealousy dislikes the world to know it. Julia was, yet I could never see why, With Donna Inez quite a favourite friend. Between their tastes there was small sympathy, For not a line had Julia ever penn'd. Some people whisper, but no doubt they lie, For malice still imputes some private end, That Inez had, ere Don Alfonso's marriage, Forgot with him her very prudent carriage; And that, still keeping up the old connection, Which time had lately render'd much more chaste, She took his lady also in affection, And certainly this course was much the best. She flatter'd Julia with her sage protection, And complimented Don Alfonso's taste; And if she could not (who can) silence scandal, At least she left it a more slender handle. I can't tell whether Julia saw the affair With other people's eyes, or if her own discoveries made, But none could be aware of this, at least no symptom e'er was shown. Perhaps she did not know, or did not care, Indifferent from the first, or callous grown. I'm really puzzled what to think or say, She kept her counsel in so close a way. Juan she saw, and as a pretty child Caress'd him often. Such a thing might be Quite innocently done, and harmless styled, When she had 20 years and 13 he. But I am not so sure I should have smiled When he was 16, Julia 23. These few short years make wondrous alterations, Particularly among the sunburnt nations. Whate'er the cause might be, they had become changed, For the dame grew distant, the youth shy, Their looks cast down, their greetings almost dumb, And much embarrassment in either eye. There surely will be little doubt with some That Donna Julia knew the reason why; But as for Juan, he had no more notion Than he who never saw the sea of ocean. Yet Julia's very coldness still was kind, And tremulously gentle her small hand Withdrew itself from his, but left behind A little pressure, thrilling, and so bland and slight, So very slight, that to the mind 'twas but a doubt. But ne'er magician's wand wrought change with all Armida's fairy art, Like what this light touch left on Juan's heart. And if she met him, though she smiled no more, She look'd a sadness sweeter than her smile, As if her heart had deeper thoughts in store She must not own, but cherish'd more the while For that compression in its burning core. Even innocence itself has many a wile, And will not dare to trust itself with truth, And love is taught hypocrisy from youth. But passion most dissembles, yet betrays Even by its darkness. As the blackest sky foretells the heaviest tempest, It displays its workings through the vainly guarded eye, And in whatever aspect it arrays itself, 'Tis still the same hypocrisy. Coldness or anger, even disdain or hate, Are masks it often wears, and still too late. Then there were sighs, the deeper for suppression, And stolen glances, sweeter for the theft, And burning blushes, though for no transgression, Tremblings when met, and restlessness when left. All these are little preludes to possession, Of which young passion cannot be bereft, And merely tend to show how greatly love is embarrassed, At first starting with a novice. Poor Julia's heart was in an awkward state, She felt it going, and resolved to make The noblest efforts for herself and mate, For honours, prides, religions, virtue's sake. Her resolutions were most truly great, And almost might have made a Tarquin quake. She pray'd the Virgin Mary for her grace, As being the best judge of a lady's case. She vow'd she never would see Juan more, And next day paid a visit to his mother, And look'd extremely at the opening door, Which, by the Virgin's grace, let in another. Grateful she was, and yet a little sore. Again it opens, it can be no other, 'Tis surely Juan now. No, I'm afraid that night the Virgin was no further pray'd. She now determined that a virtuous woman should rather face and overcome temptation, That flight was base and dastardly, and no man should ever give her heart the least sensation; That is to say, a thought beyond the common preference that we must feel upon occasion for people who are pleasanter than others. But then they only seem so many brothers; and even if by chance, and who can tell, the devil so very sly, she should discover that all within was not so very well, and if still free, that such or such a lover might please, perhaps a virtuous wife can quell such thoughts, and be the better when they're over. And if the man should ask, 'tis but denial. I recommend young ladies to make trial. And then there are such things as love divine, Bright and immaculate, unmix'd and pure, Such as the angels think so very fine, And matrons who would be no less secure; Platonic, perfect, just such love as mine. Thus Julia said, and thought so, to be sure; And so I'd have her think, were I the man On whom her reveries celestial ran. Such love is innocent, and may exist Between young persons without any danger. A hand may first, and then a lip be kiss'd. For my part, to such doings I'm a stranger, But here these freedoms form the utmost list Of all o'er which such love may be a ranger. If people go beyond, 'tis quite a crime, But not my fault, I tell them all in time. Love then, but love within its proper limits, Was Julia's innocent determination In young Don Juan's favour, and to him Its exertion might be useful on occasion; And, lighted at too pure a shrine to dim Its ethereal lustre, with what sweet persuasions He might be taught by love and her together, I really don't know what, nor Julia either. Fraught with this fine intention, and well fenced In mail of proof her purity of soul, She for the future of her strength convinced, And that her honour was a rock or mole, Exceeding sagely from that hour dispensed With any kind of troublesome control. But whether Julia to the task was equal, Is that which must be mentioned in the sequel. Her plan she deem'd both innocent and feasible, And surely with a stripling of 16 Not scandal's fangs could fix on much that's seizable, Or if they did so, satisfied to mean Nothing but what was good. Her breast was peaceable, a quiet conscience Makes one so serene. Christians have burnt each other, quite persuaded That all the apostles would have done as they did. And if in the meantime her husband died, But heaven forbid that such a thought should cross her brain, Though in a dream, and then she sighed, Never could she survive that common loss. But just suppose that moment should betide, I only say suppose it into nos. This should be entre nous, for Julia thought in French, But then the rhyme would go for naught. I only say suppose this supposition: Juan, being then grown up to man's estate, Would fully suit a widow of condition. Even 7 years hence it would not be too late, And in the interim, to pursue this vision, The mischief after all could not be great, For he would learn the rudiments of love, I mean the seraph ways of those above. Canto I, Part IV. So much for Julia. Now we'll turn to Juan, poor little fellow. He had no idea of his own case, And never hit the true one. In feelings quick as Ovid's Miss Medea, He puzzled over what he found a new one, But not as yet imagined it could be Thing quite in course, and not at all alarming, Which with a little patience might grow charming. Silent and pensive, idle, restless, slow, His home deserted for the lonely wood, Tormented with a wound he could not know, His, like all deep grief, plunged in solitude. I'm fond myself of solitude or so, but then I beg it may be understood by solitude I mean a sultan's, not a hermit's, with a harem for a grot. O love, in such a wilderness as this, where transport and security entwine, here is the empire of thy perfect bliss, and here thou art a god indeed divine. The bard I quote from does not sing amiss, with the exception of the second line, for that same twining transport and security are twisted to a phrase of some obscurity. The poet meant, no doubt, and thus appeals to the good sense and senses of mankind, the very thing which everybody feels, as all have found on trial or may find, that no one likes to be disturbed at meals or love. I won't say more about entwined or transport, as we knew all that before, but beg security will bolt the door. Young Juan wander'd by the glassy brooks, thinking unutterable things. He threw himself at length within the leafy nooks where the wild branch of the cork forest grew. There poets find material for their books, and every now and then we read them through, so that their plan and prosody are eligible, unless, like Wordsworth, they prove unintelligible. He, Juan, and not Wordsworth, so pursued his self-communion with his own high soul, until his mighty heart in its great mood had mitigated part, though not the whole of its disease. He did the best he could with things not very subject to control, and turned without perceiving his condition, like Coleridge, into a metaphysician. He thought about himself and the whole earth, of man the wonderful, and of the stars, and how the deuce they ever could have birth. And then he thought of earthquakes and of wars, how many miles the moon might have in girth, of air balloons, and of the many bars to perfect knowledge of the boundless skies. And then he thought of Donna Julia's eyes. In thoughts like these, true wisdom may discern longings sublime, and aspirations high, which some are born with, but the most part learn to plague themselves withal, they know not why. 'Twas strange that one so young should thus concern his brain about the action of the sky. If you think 'twas philosophy that this did, I can't help thinking puberty assisted. He pored upon the leaves and on the flowers, and heard a voice in all the winds, and then he thought of wood nymphs and immortal bowers, and how the goddesses came down to men. He missed the pathway, he forgot the hours, and when he looked upon his watch again, he found how much old time had been a winner. He also found that he had lost his dinner. Sometimes he turned to gaze upon his book, Boscan or Garcilaso. By the wind, even as the pages rustled while we look, so by the poesy of his own mind over the mystic leaf his soul was shook, as if 'twere one whereon magicians bind their spells, and give them to the passing gale, according to some good old woman's tale. Thus would he while his lonely hours away, dissatisfied, nor knowing what he wanted, nor glowing reverie, nor poet's lay could yield his spirit that for which it panted, a bosom whereon he his head might lay, and hear the heart beat with the love it granted, with several other things which I forget, or which at least I need not mention yet. Those lonely walks and lengthening reveries could not escape the gentle Julia's eyes. She saw that Juan was not at his ease, but that which chiefly may and must surprise is that Donna Inez did not tease her only son with question or surmise. Whether it was she did not see, or would not, or, like all very clever people, could not. This may seem strange, but yet 'tis very common. For instance, gentlemen whose ladies take leave to o'erstep the written rights of woman, and break which commandment is't they break? I have forgot the number, and I think no man should rashly quote, for fear of a mistake. I say, when these same gentlemen are jealous, they make some blunder, which their ladies tell us. A real husband always is suspicious, but still no less suspects in the wrong place. Jealous of some one who had no such wishes, or pandering blindly to his own disgrace by harbouring some dear friend extremely vicious. This last indeed's infallibly the case, And when the spouse and friend are gone off wholly, He wonders at their vice, and not his folly. Thus parents also are at times short-sighted, Though watchful as the lynx, they ne'er discover The while the wicked world beholds delighted Young Hopeful's mistress, or Miss Fanny's lover, Till some confounded escapade has blighted The plan of 20 years, and all is over. And then the mother cries, the father swears, And wonders why the devil he got heirs. But Inez was so anxious and so clear of sight, That I must think on this occasion she had some other motive, much more near, for leaving Juan to this new temptation. But what that motive was, I shan't say here. Perhaps to finish Juan's education, perhaps to open Don Alfonso's eyes, in case he thought his wife too great a prize. It was upon a day, a summer's day. Summer's indeed a very dangerous season, and so is spring about the end of May. The sun, no doubt, is the prevailing reason; But whatsoe'er the cause is, one may say, And stand convicted more of truth than treason, That there are months which nature grows more merry in. March has its hares, and May must have its heroine. 'Twas on a summer's day, the 6th of June. I like to be particular in dates, Not only of the age and year, but moon. They are a sort of post-house, where the fates change horses, Making history change its tune, Then spur away o'er empires and o'er states, Leaving at last not much beside chronology, Excepting the post-obits of theology. 'Twas on the 6th of June, about the hour of 6:30, Perhaps still nearer 7, when Julia sate Within as pretty a bower as e'er held hoary In that heathenish heaven described by Mahomet, And Anacreon more, to whom the lyre and laurels have been given, With all the trophies of triumphant song. He won them well, and may he wear them long. She sate, but not alone. I know not well how this same interview had taken place, And even if I knew, I should not tell. People should hold their tongues in any case. No matter how or why the thing befell, But there were she and Juan, face to face. When two such faces are so, 'twould be wise, But very difficult, to shut their eyes. How beautiful she look'd! Her conscious heart Glow'd in her cheek, and yet she felt no wrong. O love, how perfect is thy mystic art, Strengthening the weak and trampling on the strong! How self-deceitful is the sagest part Of mortals whom thy lure hath led along! The precipice she stood on was immense, So was her creed in her own innocence. She thought of her own strength, and Juan's youth, And of the folly of all prudish fears, Victorious virtue and domestic truth, And then of Don Alfonso's 50 years. I wish these last had not occurr'd in sooth, Because that number rarely much endears, And through all climes, the snowy and the sunny, Sounds ill in love, whate'er it may in money. When people say, "I've told you 50 times," They mean to scold, and very often do. When poets say, "I've written 50 rhymes," They make you dread that they'll recite them too. In gangs of 50 thieves commit their crimes; At 50, love for love is rare, 'tis true. But then, no doubt, it equally as true is, A good deal may be bought for 50 louis. Julia had honour, virtue, truth, and love For Don Alfonso; and she inly swore, By all the vows below to powers above, She never would disgrace the ring she wore, Nor leave a wish which wisdom might reprove. And while she ponder'd this, besides much more, One hand on Juan's carelessly was thrown, Quite by mistake. She thought it was her own. Unconsciously she lean'd upon the other, Which play'd within the tangles of her hair; And to contend with thoughts she could not smother, She seem'd, by the distraction of her air. 'Twas surely very wrong of Juan's mother To leave together this imprudent pair, She, who for many years had watch'd her son so. I'm very certain mine would not have done so. The hand which still held Juan's, by degrees gently but palpably confirm'd its grasp, as if it said, "Detain me, if you please." Yet there's no doubt she only meant to clasp his fingers with a pure platonic squeeze. She would have shrunk as from a toad or asp, had she imagined such a thing could rouse a feeling dangerous to a prudent spouse. I cannot know what Juan thought of this, but what he did is much what you would do. His young lip thank'd it with a grateful kiss, and then, abash'd at its own joy, withdrew in deep despair, lest he had done amiss. Love is so very timid when 'tis new. She blush'd and frown'd not, but she strove to speak, and held her tongue, her voice was grown so weak. The sun set, and uprose the yellow moon. The devil's in the moon for mischief. They who call'd her chaste, methinks, began too soon their nomenclature. There is not a day, the longest, not the 21st of June, Sees half the business in a wicked way, on which 3 single hours of moonshine smile. And then she looks so modest all the while. There is a dangerous silence in that hour, a stillness which leaves room for the full soul to open all itself, without the power of calling wholly back its self-control. The silver light, which hallowing tree and tower sheds beauty and deep softness o'er the whole, breathes also to the heart, and o'er it throws a loving languor, which is not repose. And Julia sat with Juan, half embraced, and half retiring from the glowing arm, which trembled like the bosom where 'twas placed. Yet still she must have thought there was no harm, or else 'twere easy to withdraw her waist. But then the situation had its charm, and then— God knows what next. I can't go on. I'm almost sorry that I e'er begun. Oh, Plato, Plato, you have paved the way with your confounded fantasies to more immoral conduct by the fancied sway your system feigns o'er the controlless core of human hearts, than all the long array of poets and romancers. You're a bore, a charlatan, a coxcomb, and have been, at best, no better than a go-between. And Julia's voice was lost except in sighs, until too late for useful conversation. The tears were gushing from her gentle eyes. I wish indeed they had not had occasion, but who, alas, can love and then be wise? Not that remorse did not oppose temptation. A little while she strove, and much repented, and whispering, "I will ne'er consent," consented.